Hey everybody, UFC Atlantic City has just wrapped, and man, what a weird fucking card. I think that perfectly sums it up. I mean, it's kind of strange how when you're watching a fight, or watching a card rather, as the fights start to progress, there can be this like weird energy that almost takes over the entire card, right? And you can feel it like, I don't know, last night I just felt like when I was watching it, it was a weird fucking card. So starts off normal enough, right? Keelan Lochran goes in, picks up a unanimous decision victory over Angel Pacheco. Looked really good, really calculated with the striking. I think he's a really talented prospect, right? But then the weirdness starts in just the second fight of the night. Jacob Malkoun versus Andre Petroski. And Petroski kind of, from the look of the replay video, KO'd himself by shooting a single leg, and he kind of smacked his head or his temple off of Malkoun's hip, right? I thought initially when you're looking at it, when you see the first angle, right, you're watching it kind of from Malkoun's back. Like you can see Malkoun's back, so it's hard to see what's happening in front of him. And he kind of does this little, like, he turns out of it and does a little kick thing, right, to avoid the single leg. And I thought that maybe his foot caught Petroski on the jaw, but that doesn't seem to be the case at all. I mean, I've watched it back several times now, and the only point of impact seems to be when Petroski shoots on the single leg and kind of like thuds against the hip, right? And you can tell that when they got out of the exchange, like whenever Jacob Malkoun did free his leg up, that Petroski was just kind of like, it's almost like when you're a wrestler, you see this all the time. Guys will get KO'd bad, and their first instinct is to start just grabbing a hold of people in wrestling. I mean, how many times do you guys see somebody get knocked out and they'll try to wrestle the referee when he stops it, right? You're just grabbing on and you're on autopilot. And I think that's what happened to Petroski. I think that when his head initially hit the hip, maybe it didn't knock him out, but it took his equilibrium away for sure. And his motor skills, he was able to keep this kind of like attachment and keep reaching because his body was just programmed to wrestle, right? Like when he got hurt, he just kept wrestling. But then when Malkoun cleared the leg and they got out into space, it's like his equilibrium fell apart and he collapsed to the ground. He was smart enough to cover up, but it's like he couldn't keep his balance, right? The covering up too before he got hit made me think that he was still there, like here, but his body just wasn't responding the way he wanted, right? So I don't know, man. Things like that always make you realize too, like how weird the fucking brain is when you start scattering it around, because you got to think when that's happening, obviously the signal's getting sent everywhere. They're getting scrambled, right? So it's like one of the craziest knockouts of all time, I think, is it Shane Burgos? Oh my God, who knocked him out? He had one of the crazy ones where he got hit. Was it Barboza? But he got hit and he like wobbles and falls back against the cage and gets knocked out like 3 seconds after he gets punched, right? So I don't know. It's weird. But to me, it seemed like he, as long as he had attachment to Malkoun, his body was almost on autopilot. But like I said, when he got out into space, everything just kind of fell apart on him. But I'm trying to look up this Burgos knockout. Was it Barboza? I'm almost positive. Yeah, Edson Barboza. He landed that right hand and it knocked Burgos out, but it was delayed. It's just, I don't know. You know what I mean? You see, just when you think you've seen somebody get knocked out every way they can be knocked out, shit like this happens, man. MMA, crazy, right? But the weirdness starts to continue, in my opinion, in the next fight. Again, and last night, also, we just got to talk about this entire theme. Last night felt like a direct message from the MMA gods coming in and saying, you need to do something about these fucking gloves. Because the eye pokes are out of control. And when you're gauging distance, right, I feel like you got to think, like, I know that you're not, when you touch everything in your day-to-day life, you're not touching it with a closed fist or a palm. When you feel things out, you're feeling with your fingertips. And there's a lot of also, they say that they don't want people reaching out with extended fingers, but is that really realistic? Like, it's clearly telling them that. They know the rules. Everybody knows the rules. Everybody knows the eye pokes are a problem, but it's not getting fucking fixed, right? Because when you're fighting, a lot of the times you're reaching out and extending with open fingers because you're hand fighting. If you watch guys like Montel Jackson always comes to mind because he's got them they wrist fight. They grab a lot, right? They're playing with your wrists and then landing shots over the top. Guys like Pereira, like, a lot of people who are good at kickboxing do that. And if your hands, right, it's not that you want to reach out and jab them with your fingers or something, right? It's that you want your hands to be open, right? So that you can grab onto things, engage your distance, and be safe and play here and cover up. Like, if you're here all the time and you're constantly keeping your fist closed, you're missing out on a big aspect of fighting and controlling the other person's hands to land your own strikes. Like, I feel like they need, the simple fucking solution is to fix the gloves, right? Like, I don't know if they work with Trevor Weidman. I don't know if they do this or that. I don't know what they do, but the way that it is now, it's a gigantic problem, and it was impacting fights severely last night. And in particular, this Ibo Aslan, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, maybe Ibo Aslan versus Anton Turkalj. This was a good fight. They just sat in a fucking phone booth and traded, right? Which I thought was a dangerous game plan from Anton, but it seemed like he couldn't really get the fight to the ground when he tried to wrestle. So I think he said, fuck it, let's let it fly. But anyway, Aslan gets poked in the eye, and the referee, Gary Copeland, I believe, is almost cornering him. He's like, I recommend that you take the full 5 minutes, right? Are you sure you're ready? He asked him like 100 times if he was ready to go, and it's like, dog, he's telling you he's ready. It is not your job to assist this fighter in doing what is best for him to win the fight. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he knows that he has time. You can be like, you have time. That should be the extent of your statement. And you use the words, I advise you. You should never be using the words advise as a referee. You're inserting yourself into the fight in an odd way, and I didn't like that at all. And I get it, mistakes happen. Like, you're a referee, you're thinking like, and there is this thing that you hear all the time in commentary and you just see it, like, fighters will get fouled and they don't take as much time as maybe they should to recover because they feel like they want to get on with it. But also, there's something to getting on with it. Like, while your body's warm and you feel like you're going, like, it depends on the situation you're in, obviously. But if the fighter tells you that he's ready, I don't think it's your job or duty to keep delaying that and giving him advice. My personal opinion. So I thought that was odd. I felt like he wanted to be more a part of the fight maybe than he was. That always bothers me when I see it from referees. And I don't know. I just thought that was a mistake. And like I said, first indicator that eye pokes are a problem because Turkalj got him with a good one, right? Moving on. We had we're going to come back to this eye poke theme, and then we'll get on to replays and everything, especially when we start talking about the Weidman fight. But moving on, Dennis Buzukja. What a weird I thought it was Buzukja when I read it, right? But Dennis Buzukja versus Connor Matthews. Connor kind of started off strong in the first round, but then Dennis started to take over, and was his left hand. Man, he looked good. I liked a lot. He was using a lot of different weapons that I thought were effective, but in particular that left hook. That left hook is money, man. He's got a really, really nice left hook. And you hate to draw comparisons because I'm obviously not putting him on this pedestal at all. I know, but like, it's Gaethje-esque. The way he just like sneaks it in there and lands it on guys. Like, he just gets around the guard with it. Really fucking nice left hook. Like I said, I don't want to like dismiss all the other things that he did well, but when you have a weapon like that lands consistently despite guys, like when they can't, that's a problem. Right? Like, that's something that he can lean on in his game because his hands are so smooth. So I really like that from Buzukja. He looked good. Julio Arce versus Herbert Burns. Again, weird fight. And I never like to put these accusations on people, right? But this is my and this isn't fair, but this is my personal opinion when I watch Herbert Burns fights. I feel like, I know he's been injured, and I feel like he gives up on himself. I feel like he gets into these moments, like he was fighting Arce well. He was putting him up against the cage, looking for takedowns. He might not have been getting them, right? But he was looking for them. He was pressuring him. He was probably outmatched in terms of striking prowess, but I don't know. It's like the second, or he gets tired. It's one of the two, right? Like, it's tiredness, or you're just like the other guy starts finding the smallest inkling of success and you start like fading. But you got to be able to go. I mean, if you want to be a world champion, you got to go 25 minutes. But at a UFC level, and coming from he knows. Look at his brother. He knows what it looks like to be at that level. You got to be able to fight for 15 minutes, man. So if it's a gassing out problem, that has to get fixed. If it's up here, I don't know. But personally, it looks like Burns either gasses out and then he starts getting hurt, or he is playing mental battles with himself and he starts like kind of quitting on himself a little bit in the fights. because last night felt like a winnable fight for Burns. And it felt like for whatever reason, he just completely got away from the game plan and the things that started to work in the first round. I don't know. Like, I never like to, I guess you are. Like, that's part of what I'm doing, right? I am trying to pretend to be in their head and be like, what's going on here, right? But I don't want to put any assumptions on him. But, man, it's like I don't think cardio at this level, like, you haven't remedied that by yet. You haven't done a little bit of work in that department yet. And it's not like he's doing these big, explosive-ass movements to drain his gas tank. That's what makes me think that, like, I don't know. I don't know if it is because of the injuries that's hindering him mentally, but it feels like that to me. Virna Jandiroba versus Loopy Godinez. I feel like the difference maker in this fight was just the fact that in the first and third round, Virna was able to get to her back. She closed the first round out on Loopy's back. Loopy probably won the second round, but then Virna closed the third round out on her back for like half the round. So, I just thought that that moment was a little bit bigger, despite the fact that Loopy probably did more damage throughout the fight, right? But when you're on somebody's back, it's hard not to score that round for them, especially in the first where I felt like it was close. And then the third, Loopy just sacrificed too much control time with Virna on her back. So the back is a dominant position. And I know that like it is just control, but you got to think about it from the perspective of your opponent. Like they can't face you. They can do this kind of stuff. You ever seen anybody get knocked out with this though? I mean, at a high level, maybe there's some bullshit clip on the internet somewhere of some amateur fight or something, or maybe even a pro fight, I don't know. But like, when's the last time you saw somebody getting their back taken and land one of these and knock somebody out? Like, it just doesn't happen. There's nothing you can really do. You're in danger of getting choked. And other than the mount, you're in the most dangerous position in the sport. You know what I mean? Like, you're seconds away if you slip up from getting choked out or getting submitted in some way. So I don't know. Mount and MMA is probably preferable, or even like a fucking half guard's very popular. You don't see a whole lot of side control in fighting like you do, but guys are able to roll away and stuff and then start building back to their feet. So you see a lot of half guard, but mount and the back are the most effective. There's an argument for mount, but I don't know, man. It just felt like Virna did enough to win the fight despite the fact that it was close and Loopy did more damage. It's a weird one. Next, this was the funnest fight on the card, I think. Nate Landwehr versus Jamal Emmers. The way this fight starts off for the first, half of the first round, you're thinking, man, Nate is going to be in some big trouble here, right? Jamal was teeing off on him, but then Jamal just started slowing down. And it was like the shots didn't have the effect that they did at the beginning of the fight. And you could tell that when Nate sensed that, he just started fucking pouring it on. Because he was having trouble closing the distance on Jamal. Jamal was tagging him with the end of his punches. I mean, catching him. And by the way, what a chin on Nate Landwehr. He ate some fucking shots in this fight before rallying back and picking up a knockout of his own. And he's just so good and he's durable, man. You know what he reminds me of a little bit? And not in the same type of way, but like in terms of their style, but in terms of how their fights play out, he reminds me a lot of Darren Elkins. Like he'll get into these wars and you're like, man, he's outgunned, he's outmatched. And then he just fucking never quits on himself. And because of that, that's the crazy thing about fighting too, is that the more skilled guy does not always win. Sometimes in fighting, like I feel like in jiu-jitsu, for example, like if somebody is much more skilled than you, you're probably going to get submitted, right? But in a fight, there's so many different variables that you kind of can, like having that dog mentality can go a long fucking way, right? Like I feel that way about Fluffy Hernandez. Look at him. I talk about Fluffy a lot. I'm a big Fluffy Hernandez. But like when you look at him, the way he submitted Adolfo Vieira, if they had a jiu-jitsu match, I mean, I'm sure Fluffy would hold his own, but realistically, like Adolfo's going to win that most of the time, right? Because he's more skilled. But in fighting, that doesn't matter. You can assert yourself and like you can use your willpower. Like sometimes the person with the stronger willpower wins fights. And I think Nate Landwehr is a great example of that, right? Just a guy who never quits on himself, and he puts on some of the funnest fights. Funnest fight of the night by far was that fight. All right, moving on to the main card. Also, just want to touch on this real quick. A lot of people are kind of, as you see online, a lot of people are talking shit about how boring Blanchfield versus Manon was, all this stuff. Chidi versus Rhys McKee was one of the most boring fights I've ever watched in my life. It was so fucking boring. There weren't any moments where I felt like I was excited or either guy was in danger. The crowd was literally, I just like this morning was going back through the fight and kind of just like fast forwarding through it. The crowd was booing for entire rounds at a time, it felt like. Like every time I click forward, boo, it's just like droning on and on and on. Boring ass fight. So I hate that women fights sometimes get this like stigma attached to them that they're boring, right? There's a lot of boring ass guy fights. And the fight that we saw last night between Manon and Blanchfield, we're going to get to it and cover it in more detail, but that was not for lack of skill. Sometimes that's just how shit goes. You know what I mean? And I feel like you're talking about guys in Chidi and Njokuani and Rhys McKee here. Like it's just the nature of fighting. Sometimes fights are going to be boring. And I don't think it boils down to gender. It's just how it fucking goes. All right, Kyle Nelson versus Bill Algeo. Kyle Nelson looked really good in this fight. And I thought that Algeo was going to dot him up. Nelson, though, just landed the... And again, talking about the weirdness, I thought this was an early stoppage. I thought Algeo was hurt badly, but the man's on his feet. The man's on his feet, and he's looking back at his opponent. He's not looking for a way out. Like his head's coming back to fight. He's trying. You know what I mean? I think you let the guy go out. I know that's like a brutal way to look at it, but in terms of fighting, unless it's egregious, and there's a line, and I understand that line can be very fine, but I'm in favor personally of letting the person get finished, right? Like let him go out, because you see moments, and I always refer back to it, but moments like Frankie Edgar versus Gray Maynard where you think it's over for him, but you let him fight back, and he ends up coming back and winning. You know what I mean? Or I think you know what I mean. Like you can end up coming back from that, and I feel like Algeo wasn't really given that opportunity, and I know it's brutal, but I'd rather see guys go out cold because I want to see if that's actually what's going to happen. Like, is the referee interjecting here, or is this guy really going to get finished? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for, when I'm watching the fight, I want the ref to stop it when I feel like this guy might, like, really, he's not going to be able to stop this. Like, if this were to continue, he really is going to, like, beat him to a pulp, right? Simulated death match, as Uriah Faber would say. Like, I want the fight to get to that point. And when a guy's on his feet, I don't know, man, especially in the center. If you're up against the cage, it's different. You're leaning on it, I understand. But out in the center of the octagon, you're on your feet, that's a hard one for me, man. I like finality. But great fight. Great fight. Just, again, a little bit of another weird one. That's what I mean. This whole card had that weird energy. Same thing with the next fight. Nursulton Ruziboev. I know I'm pronouncing it correct. I'm always fucking names up. I'll get better. Versus Sedriques Dumas. Again, ended in an eye poke. But on Dumas's part, I understand that you want to let the referee know that you got poked in the eye. But when you do this and you turn your face away from your opponent, it's defend yourself at all times. Like, he started looking for it immediately. Like, you just opened up your jaw for him to start bringing a punch. So I get it. You're frustrated, but you got to fight. Like, close that if the referee's not stopping it, close that fucking eye and just keep fighting. Like, you got to find a way to tell him while you're defending. I know it's hard. I've never done it, but you got to find a way to be like, oh, I got fucking poked in the eye, but still defend yourself. Close an eye and fight. Like, you can't. I understand that it's frustrating, but man, you gotta, in that moment, you gotta keep defending yourself and trying to fight through it. You know what I mean? And again, highlighting issues with the eye pokes, right? It's a problem. It's a problem that needs fixed. They need to get the fingers bent down somehow and more relaxed. And like I said, it's going to, and again, the next one, Chris Weidman versus Bruno Silva. They end up ending this in a unanimous decision because of some weird fucking rule that makes no sense to me, right? You stop, whatever. I don't know. Dumb. You collect the scorecards on a round that hasn't even been completed yet and then call him the winner via decision. No, it was via TKO. He didn't knock him out cold, but it stopped because basically a foul didn't get recognized. But again, Chris Weidman hitting Bruno Silva with the all-time classic eye poke, left hook, right? And the left hook definitely landed, but it also glanced off the shoulder of Silva first and then kind of hit him on the head. So I doubt it was a KO shot. And you can see on the way to the ground, Silva's like grabbing his eye all dramatically and stuff. And right before this, he had just been poked. And again, Gary Copeland saying it looks like you both poked each other in the eye. No, it didn't. It looked like fucking Silva got poked in the eye and Silva was throwing a punch that hit Weidman, right? Like maybe the thumb slipped in there, but he wasn't extending his fingers like Weidman was. And then immediately after that, you see clear as day on the replay that Weidman pokes him again with the pinky, and then hits him with the left hook. Poke, left hook. Clear. You should be able to look at that replay and say, no contest. The TKO was a result of a foul, right? It stemmed from a foul. Fight over, no contest. We'll book it again moving forward, or we'll move on from it. The logistics can get sorted out later. But in that moment, what is the point of instant replay? What is the point? You're using instant replay to observe two obvious fouls that led to a knockout that was not a legitimate knockout. What's the point of replay in this instance if we're not? I don't understand. Things like this about MMA, I understand that it's new, but it's also been 21 fucking years. Like, it's been around for a while now. And if you're watching other sports like the NFL and the NBA, like, if you want to be in that category, these things need fucking sorted out. The eye poke thing needs sorted out. This type of thing where the replay and you can see a foul on the screen and you ended the fight and you can't call it a no contest using that replay footage, that is insane to me. These things need sorted out. This is where MMA is still behind in terms of like standardization. And I know the more rules you add, the more rigid it becomes and the more sport-like it becomes, but it is a sport. It is not a street fight, right? This is a display of martial arts, and there are going to be rules put around it, right? Like, there are going to be parameters set up. It's just how it goes. I feel like last night should have been a clear no contest. I didn't understand at all how they gave Weidman the win. All right, moving on. Another fight. I felt like this was such a weird fight. I felt like the first round was competitive, kind of what you expected. They're going at it on the feet a little bit. I don't know who you give the first round to. I thought it was close. But the second round, Luque shoots on Buckley. Buckley stuffs it, gets on top, and then just kind of like punches his way to a TKO victory via ground and pound. Like, I felt like there wasn't really a lot of effort from Luque to get back to his feet. Like, he was just kind of content to shell up and just kind of stay collapsed in that position with the knee shield. I thought he should have been wrestling a little bit. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And again, Vicente Luque is a fucking veteran. And when I say stuff like this, I'm aware that I'm sitting right here, Monday morning quarterbacking all this, right? Sunday morning whatever. But it just felt like there wasn't this urgency from Luque to get back to his feet. And this is a big win for Buckley because it's going to thrust him in to the top 10 now. He's going to be fighting the likes of these like more talented guys. And Buckley's dangerous, man. But again, last night, just a weird night of fights. All right, and finally, Manon versus Aaron Blanchfield. So, a lot of shit getting talked about this fight online, and for reasons that I cannot understand. I've seen comments like on ESPN MMA, I think MMA Junkie site, whatever, about the fight saying that was the number 2 and number 3 ranked fighters in the world. What a disgrace. Blah, blah, blah. I'm done watching female fights. They're so boring. You know what fight was fucking boring? Chidi and Njokuani versus Rhys McKee. The first round of Weidman versus Bruno Silva. Sometimes, guys, fights are just boring. That's just how it goes. And last night had nothing to do with the skill level of these two women. What you saw last night were two of the best fighters in the world, and the woman with the historically more boring, right? With the historically more boring style won the fight. Manon, sometimes, guys, boring and effectiveness in MMA go hand in hand. Right? And Manon is just very simplistic in her game plan. She stays behind the jab. She works her lead. She does work it at lead angles, but she stays behind her lead hand, right? And she uses her kicks to keep people at bay. She's a strong wrestler. She's got a long, tall frame, so she uses her reach to her advantage. And Aaron Blanchfield was just never able to make this a fight. She was never able to put that pressure on Manon and close that distance and do the things that she needed to do to maybe bring some of that like dog out in Manon. Manon was just able to stay cool and calculated for 5 rounds, right? What you saw last night were two highly skilled women fighting, and one of them, in my opinion, looked a little bit undersized, which is crazy because Blanchfield was kind of talking about how Rose was too undersized for 125. Well, Blanchfield, now that she's fought and been in the octagon across from Fiorot, She looked undersized last night. Manon is a big girl. She is a true flyweight, and I think you just saw that last night. I think Blanchfield, maybe if she wants to stay at 125, maybe fills out a little bit. And now that she's felt that, she also in that fight had moments of success. Those are things that you can start building on as a young fighter. But you can't deny that Erin Blanchfield is skilled. Sometimes these things just collide and it's not the most exciting fight in the world. But I still thought this fight was more exciting than Chidi versus Rhys McKee, right? I thought it was a good fight. And you just saw that Blanchfield didn't quite have everything that she needed, whether it be like size, strength, whatever, skill. Like maybe she's just not quite on that like level to fight at a championship level. But make no mistake, Manon is a problem. Like she might not be the most exciting fighter to watch, but I have a feeling that when she fights somebody like an Alexa Grasso, who has that world championship mindset, who does have that, like, I'm going to bring the fight to you a little bit. I'm going to box. Grasso has good hands. Like, she's going to bring the fight to Fio. And I think, like I said, when somebody brings it to her, you might see that dog come out in her a little bit more. But what you saw last night, if we were talking about a male contender, I think we would be like a little bit, I don't know. You get guys like Bilal and they get shit for doing the same kind of thing, right? Like it's boring and effective, but they win. But I think Manon last night became undeniable in the same way that, in my opinion, Bilal is undeniable. But obviously that's not true to the UFC. But no, you just saw that sometimes these matchups take place, and it's not that either. I hate that women's MMA kind of gets that stigma attached to it. That it's the only thing that I will say about women's MMA is that there isn't that game-changing power, right? In most instances, like guys tend to have that a little bit more. Like the men's divisions, when you can crack, it makes things more exciting. Or even if you can finish, like look at the career that Ronda built. When she was able to finish girls, just the fact that she submitted them, it does. Look at Conor McGregor finishing people. Like your ability to finish and create these highlight reels is what ultimately like sells you and turns you into a superstar. And I think that does lack a little bit more in women's MMA, but it's also new. But just because last night's fight was boring doesn't mean that Manon versus Grasso is going to be boring. You know what I mean? I just think that Manon historically, like I said, throughout her UFC career, she hasn't had the most exciting fights in the world. She fights to decisions, but she wins. And when she goes up against Grasso, somebody who might turn this into a fight, because she's able to start penetrating some of these defenses that Fio's put up that girls like Blanchfield haven't been able to penetrate, now we might be talking. So, I don't know. I just think some of the hate is unjust. It's not fair. And I don't know. I think it should chill out a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, yes, there are some boring girl fights, but there's a lot of boring guy fights too. So, I don't know. Anyway, look at Rose versus Hebos last weekend. That was a fun-ass fight. Like, what are we talking about? You know what I mean? At the top level, the female fights are exciting to watch, I think. And last night, the matchup just didn't play out that way. But nothing to do with those girls being unskilled. If anything, Manon might be the best in the world right now, and she proved that last night. So we're going to find out when she goes up against Grasso. Fun matchup. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it. Like I said, weird fucking card. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I saw a card so weird, but it was like I said, like the MMA gods reached down and like inserted eye pokes into almost every bout, and we're like, you gonna look at this and fix it? You know what I mean? Like, resulted in 2 fucked up TKO losses on the card. Maybe we do something about this. So we'll see. But anyway, like I said, strange. We'll try to get one out for Wednesday, guys. Thank you as always for tuning in. Much appreciated. Hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed. Thumbs up, leave a comment, all that good shit. And yeah, we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.